Hello and welcome to another virtual event with Tattered Cover. My name is Adam and I work at Tattered Cover, and it's a pleasure to invite all of you virtually here. Before we hopped on, I was talking to tonight's author who lives in Maine but isn't currently in Maine, and I'm actually in Maine on vacation. So we're doing a virtual event for Colorado's largest bookstore, and none of us are in Denver right now. But like I said, Tattered Cover is Colorado's largest independent bookstore. It is 50 years old this year, so thank you to all the readers who have supported us over the past half century. It's people like you and authors like Catherynne and Valente, who was here tonight, that are amazing and support us. If you need closed captioning tonight, or if you want it, there is a black bar at the bottom of your YouTube screen that says CC. You can definitely just click that and get closed captioning for the event. Before we officially get tonight underway, I do want to say please check out tatteredcover.com to buy Catherynne's book, but also to check out more events. You can go to tatteredcover.com/events to see all of our virtual events, and we are doing some in person by the end of the year. So check out tatteredcover.com/events. In less than a week, we have Kate Moore, who will be with us on the 28th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, presenting The Woman They Cannot Silence. It's another nonfiction book. If you're familiar with her work, it's all about empowering women and talking about history that we haven't seen before really unfold. But tonight, I already said her name. Her name is Catherynne Valente. She has a new book out called The Past is Red. The Past is Red. She is a New York Times and USA bestselling author of 40 books of fantasy and science fiction. She lives on a small island off the coast of Maine with her partner, one medium-sized dog, one very enormous cat, and a baby son slightly less enormous than the cat for now. It is my absolute pleasure to bring Catherynne M. Valente on. Catherynne, please join us virtually and we will get tonight's event underway.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. So your bio is one of my favorite bios. I read a lot of bios doing what I do. So thank you for making it fun. You have written many, many books.
Because the cat is a Maine Coon, so still bigger than the son, actually, even though he's 2.5.
Yes, and you have written so many books. You have a new book out that we are here to talk about. The Past is Red. Tell readers what it's about for those who may not know.
Yeah, so it's just about the most cheerful climate change dystopia you're likely to find. It is a story that takes place after the ice caps have melted and the sea levels have risen, and most of humanity is that's left is stuck on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a real thing. I feel like I've had to say that it's real far more than I thought. There is a giant Texas-sized patch of garbage floating around the Pacific. And the conceit of this book is that as the cities were inundated, much more trash ended up glommed onto this thing, and over the generations was sort of sorted into neighborhoods, and a mishmash of culture has sprung up. And the main character is named Tetley Abednego, and she loves her world. She loves everything that she experiences, even though what she experiences is objectively terrible, both personally and sort of globally. So sort of the joy of this book is the juxtaposition between these two things. You know, Tetley's constantly optimistic voice and the absolute horror world that she lives in. It started out as a short story, which is included in the volume. And then The Past is Red is a novella that sort of continues on in the world into some pretty unexpected corners of it.
Definitely. And I asked right before this if you wanted to read, and I think I would love to hear just a little to read from it. What are you going to be reading for us?
So I'm going to read from the part that we ended up making enamel pins of. We've sort of been talking about these enamel pins and not really explaining to anyone what the 8th best daffodil is, but that's what all of the pre-order prizes were. And I'm going to read the part that sort of explains that. Tetley is on the run from people who are very angry at her, and she takes refuge in a particular neighborhood, abandoned neighborhood of Garbage Town, where a bunch of objects that have no particular use in the post-apocalyptic world have been stashed.
Awesome. I will give you the spotlight and I'll hop on after your reading then.
Right. Winditch is the opposite direction from the Matchstick Forest and Flint Wheel Hill and all the places I went on my way to find my name when I was a child. Away from the leeward edge of Garbage Town, away from the sea. I picked through the deflated soccer balls and broken lacrosse sticks and ghostly hanging nets of Sportington Gap, the cairns of ice skates, black pucks, tennis rackets, billiard balls like jawbreaker candies, the baffling novelty devices with "as seen on TV" stamped on their handles, the rusting free weights that once kept some drowned fuckwit thin and strong in the face of their constant fucking smorgasbord of a life. Dawn was on the move by the time I scrambled down a steep cliff face of burned out Jumbotron scoreboards. Home of the Tigers, Go Gators, Yokohama Bay Stars, Fly Emirates. I hung down by my fingertips and dropped the last few feet onto a patch of wet, moldy gym mats. Winditch is almost a cave. It goes under the gap for ages, holding it all up, thankless forever. A thin little rain started to fall as I slipped away under the golf club stalactites and into my cave of wonders. I took off the gas mask and breathed free. I'd be safe here for a while. It felt so good and giddy to be traveling again. Thin scraps of sunlight crawled down between raindrops and through the mouth of the scoreboard cave. Winditch lit up all over gold and silver, but mostly gold. Gold everywhere. Mr. Aladdin, eat your heart out. I walked through the heaps and mounds and pillars of treasure, running my hands over it, stopping to stare. My old friends. Trophies. Thousands, millions of them, 1,000,000,000 victories. Cups, stars, orbs, numbers, little brass girls and brass boys in flapping brass togas dancing or swimming or flying or standing proud on plastic red and white and blue and green columns. Amazing. So amazing. All of it. Always. Oh, the secret, molten, golden heart of Garbage Town. Hide me forever. I used to spend hours reading the plaques on the trophies, feeling the engraved names on my fingertips, sounding them out, imagining all these joyful fuckwits holding them tight to their chest. Gregory Ambrose, spelling bee participant. Kai-Hong Chen, most improved effort. Andrei Berenkov, better luck next time. Samantha Belfort, tried hardest. Lucy Price Kowalski, if you had fun, you won. Newport Volleyball Tournament 2029, sponsored by Al's Clam Shack. Aiden Kleinhauser, most at bats. Isabella Jorgensen, 8th runner-up, Miss Daffodil Pageant, Junior Division. Terrence Hardy, best smile. Lucy and Samantha and Kai-Hong were all well and good, but I had a favorite. I found it after my father ran off wherever fathers go when they don't want you anymore. Dadbury, father side. I couldn't relax and stretch out in my new digs till I found it. I hadn't come to Winditch in years, but I knew it would be here, right where I left it. St. Oscar would do that for me. He always liked me special. Farther in, farther up. Yes, I pulled it off the pile. A gold vase full of gold roses. Rotted red ribbons swarming with fungus still clung to the gold handles for dear life. And the plaque read, Gretchen Barnes, world's best wife. What a girl Gretchen Barnes must have been to earn her title out of all the fuckwit billions. I didn't even know that was something you could be best at. I was in awe of her. The whole world must have known her name. But not like the world knew mine. I sat down on the damp floor of that golden cave while the dawn piled in with a gas mask in one hand and Gretchen Barnes in the other, surrounded by all those fuckwit triumphs. Oh, I know they were the worst kind of death-guzzling monsters, sick and swollen as blood blisters, stupid, hungry, toothful voids in the shape of people, but they must have loved each other so fucking much. Imagine being so alive and conscious of the importance of every single second of constantly winnowing life, every single simplest action and choice and effort and onrushing death, that you would carefully mark out little Lucy having fun and crown her for it, like she was the queen of time. Imagine having so much energy to spare after finding food and shelter and clothing in some tiny goddamn scrap of company that you figured you'd make a beautiful silver cup. Not because some kid did the best job, just because she tried the hardest. I try the hardest all the time, and everyone's just permanently fucking mad at me. Imagine having that much left over that you give one single ghostly shit about the eighth best daffodil.
Thank you so much. Just listening to you read it, it's so laugh out loud funny in like ways I don't think like people think a post-apocalyptic climate change novel could be.
Yeah.
Which is just like that is your writing. For those joining us, please ask questions. We already have a bunch of questions in the chat, so keep asking them. We'll get to them at the end. But for now, I'm gonna ask Kat every question I want to know about her and her book. You mentioned this started as a short story, then it evolved into what it is now and the format it is now. Why did you have to make it more than a short story? What drew you to the bigger world?
Well, it all comes back to Tetley always. It's so funny because I'm sitting 10 feet from where I wrote the short story, oddly enough, despite the fact that I'm not at home, I'm at my dad's house. Because we live so far apart, I usually come for quite a bit when I visit, and that means I still need to work. So I wrote it right over there in a place called the Blue Room, believe it or not. But as soon as I wrote the first line of the story, I was kind of in love with her. And by the end of the first paragraph, I knew that I was probably going to want to do more with her than a short story. I'm pretty good about knowing when there's more in there. But I didn't, I mean, I packed with contracts and didn't really know what shape or form that would take. And so when my editor asked if I was interested in doing a novella, not a Garbage Town novella, but a Tetley novella, because I think that everybody who's read it knows that Tetley is a huge part of what's special about this. There's a lot of post-apocalyptic books out there, but there's not a lot of Tetleys. I jumped at the chance to spend more time in her world, but I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do with it at first, because there's kind of an arc, a natural arc to a coming of age story, which is what the short story is. And, once you've kind of revealed the worst thing someone's ever done, where do you go with that? But she's really only 19 at the end of the short story. So, it was interesting to me to look at her later in life. Their coming of age stories tend to get told about young people, but in fact, we all come of different ages as we arrive at them. And I think that the Past is Red section is, which is much, much longer, is just as much a coming of age story. It's just coming of 30 instead of coming of maturity. And of course, in a place like Garbage Town, where there's functionally no medical care, 30 is a lot older than it is in our world. So it's only been out for a couple days, so I know that people haven't gotten to the end yet. So I can't exactly say there's a big twist at the end, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody. But the character of Mr. was something I knew that I wanted to get in there. That was kind of the thing I found that I wanted to sort of find a way to push on her from the outside of her world. And it was pretty tough to come up with a way to do that, because I'm very committed to there is no way back. There's no saving the world in this story. And then what she discovers at the end of the book is meant to be a huge gut punch, and very much from outside her own experience.
I promise I won't talk about Maine a lot, but the room I'm staying in my father's house is the Blue Room. And the fact that you said that, I know your dad's in
dad's office is the Blue Room.
But so do you often write short stories just to get creative juices flowing? Like you said, there's contracts, you have to deliver books.
Yeah.
How often are you writing short stories?
I really do enjoy writing short stories, and part of the reason that I write them is for this exact thing. I was asked to contribute to a climate change anthology, particularly one about sea levels rising. I'd never written anything like that before. And I think Jonathan Strawn took me at my word when he heard me say that my favorite thing to write is the thing everyone thinks I would never write. So it was a challenge. It was a way to try out something new without having kind of the pressure of a big, huge project. And I really enjoy that. And it often either goes directly into a bigger project like this, or at least sort of twigs an interesting new tack that gets folded into other work. So it's kind of a pipeline, my short fiction. But I would say that these days, I kind of took a break when I had a baby, but these days I probably write 3 or 4 short stories a year. I used to write a lot more than that, so I'm winnowing down. But The Future is Blue was part of a year where, God, even this seems nuts to me now. I challenged myself to write a short story every month for the year, whether
Mm,
I could sell them or not, and it was the first one.
wow.
Uh, so, it was already bought by the anthology, but it was a kickoff to a challenge I gave myself.
Yeah, and so, that the short story being something it was a challenge, and then the novella was kind of also a challenge. How was writing I'll just call it this whole project, this
Yeah.
project different than past novels and other projects? Because there was kind of, what was there a twist to it, or am I just making that up because of how you kind of phrased it? Like,
No, I mean, I think that there's a couple of twists in the plot, and then there's Tetley. I wrote the first one in January of 2016, and I wrote the novella at the end of 2019, and boy, did a lot happen
mm,
between there. And then a whole bunch of stuff would happen in 2020 that actually is kind of relevant to some of the things in the book, but I didn't know about any of that when I wrote it. I think that it all, like as I said before, it all kind of comes around to Tetley herself.
yeah.
You know, I worried whether I could get back into that voice. She's very, very unlike me,
Mm,
and it is a unique voice, and the sort of balancing act of keeping that optimism without making her stupid or a fool or delusional or any of the things that kind of Candide in the original optimist in a terrible world story is a tough one, and I worried whether I could get back into that. And there is kind of an arc where she loses some of that as just events upon events pile on her. But I just love her to pieces, and it really it really is different than most of my other characters because she kind of just came fully formed into my head, and I've kind of just followed her lead.
for people who haven't read this yet, because it just came out, but who have read all of your other things, in a brief synopsis, how is she different other than like the voice? Like,
Um, well, I am not an optimist like she is, and even in my middle grade work, September isn't an optimist like that either. September is, well, I mean, she's a fuckwit. Like we think of her as um, you know being hungry and bullied, and her father's gone off to war and everything, but from Tetley's perspective, she is living a life of plenty. And September is much cannier than Tetley in a lot of ways. She's very genre aware, and that's probably the most kind of innocent Alice like character I've ever written. And Tetley is not particularly genre aware because she's unaware of genres as a concept, but she is just herself. Everything she looks at, she sees the best in. And part of that is that she has no particular context for anything. So if she sees a trophy for the world's best wife, she just takes it at face value.
mm,
And that is kind of a radically confronting thing for us jaded fuckwits living in the red past. And so it's sort of difficult to keep that up when my world is not one that I often see. I often find it easy to see the beauty in.
mm,
Uh, but but I do love her very much. Peter Beagle came to my writing class when I was 15, when I was in high school, and he said it was very transformative for me. Like, it was a big moment for me becoming a writer. And he said a lot of things I thought were brilliant. And then he said something I didn't understand at all. He wrote The Last Unicorn, for those who don't know. And there's a character in The Last Unicorn named Molly Grew, and she's the one that gets angry when she first meets the unicorn and yells at it. That it didn't come when she was young and beautiful and full of energy, like people who meet unicorns are supposed to be. And he said that he had no business knowing Molly Grew, that she was too good for him, and he had nothing to do with her. And I was like, this guy's nuts. What is he talking about? Like, he wrote every word of her, every description, every bit of dialogue. He wrote all of it. He doesn't know, like, what does that even mean? And now I totally get it, because I have no business knowing Tetley. She is too good for me, and I don't feel like I had much to do with her. I feel very much as though she was speaking through me, which is much more esoteric than I like to get about writing. I'm all about demystifying writing, but in this one
mhm.
case, the exception proves the rule.
Are there any books of yours or characters that this book is similar to for those who have read a lot of your
I
work?
think there's some similarity with the voice of the refrigerator monologues. There's kind of stylistic commonality there. Everything I write connects with folklore on some level, and there's little bits of that. Part of the reason that the story unfolded as it did in the first place was a line in the anthology pitch, which was, what kind of stories will we be telling after the ultimate calamity occurs? And my brain kind of automatically answered, well, exactly the same kind of stories we're telling now, because we never ever change in any way,
Mhm.
in any significant way. I'm a classicist by training. I read Greek and Latin, and if you read Latin, man, you can read Catullus, and it's exactly the
Mhm.
same stuff you can find in Bitter Lonely Hearts forums now. Humanity doesn't change a lot, just our toys do. So I wanted to write a story where, you know, this was just the world, just the real world, just the normal world, and the people in it didn't know anything else. It's not something I had seen done a lot, as far as post-apocalyptic literature. And so in that sense, it's like a lot of my other books in that it uses the tropes and the conventions of human storytelling. It's just that the setting that it's in is the blown apart
Mhm.
human world.
I like what you said about like demystifying writing. So I kind of want to shift now
Yeah, yeah.
to like the writing process. It's something that really interests me. I don't know if the readers out there are as interested. So if you're not interested in this, put it in the chat and I'll stop asking these questions. But your writing process, let's demystify it. What
Sure.
from inception, maybe a current project you're working on, what does that inception look like?
So I write from beginning to end. I don't jump around. I have ADHD, so if I
Mhm.
skip over a section, I will literally never ever go back and write it. So I write from the first word to the last word, which means I edit as I go along.
Mhm.
So people often ask like, "Oh, how many drafts do you do?" And it's kind of a meaningless question for my process, because I don't know, by the time I get to, the last period on the last page, it's the equivalent of something like a third draft, but I've been going along and editing and rewriting chapters the whole way. So it's kind of a lump all in
Mhm.
my head. I use Scrivener. I don't know what I would do without Scrivener. And you know, I usually, with almost all projects, I will write the first few chapters just without any particular plan, except for whatever I sold it on,
Mhm.
just sort of playing around and letting it grow organically. And then I will take a step back and I will sort of loosely outline the rest. But again, that ADHD thing is rough, because if I know everything is going to happen, my brain gets bored and wanders off. So
Mhm.
I have to sort of keep it a loose outline in order to keep my hyper focus kind of interested in the project at hand. And with novellas, I write pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Uh, so I will be producing several thousand words a day and then going back and sort of editing them at the beginning of the next day, and then moving on if I can. I kind of feel it like a broken bone if the previous chapter isn't working, and I can't really go on to the next one until it is. So that's kind of how I work, generally speaking.
I- Is it an image, a character, a setting? Is it anything? What kicks you off on a project?
It totally depends on the project. Each one is different. So with this one, just the first line of the first story, the my name is Telly Abednego and I'm the most hated girl in Garbage Town, just kind of plopped out of my head onto the page.
Mm.
And then that provides like, well, I have to decide why she's so hated. And that actually took me a long time I was almost all the way through the story before, I kind of figured out what exactly she'd done. And that sort of, it's like dancing while doing a puzzle. That sort of thing is part of the pleasure of writing for me, sort of discovering what uh, what the first line seeded to the last line. So with this one, it was that first line and the idea of Garbage Town, and that I had read something about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and honestly, like just some random thing I read turns into work more often than you'd think. Like just some random news article about the pile of trash in the ocean, and it's become all of this. And with other ones, there's more of a thesis. With the refrigerator monologues, it was being so frustrated with the fact that despite Gail Simone pointing this out over and over again, they're still making the same stories with women getting killed so that superheroes can have some kind of motivation. And, particularly I was angry at the second Amazing Spider-Man movie. So like this kind of stuff comes from literally everywhere. And sometimes it is a character, sometimes it's a world, sometimes it's kind of a core image or a moment. I have little notebooks everywhere with bits and pieces that might end up becoming something someday in them. So yeah, I've written a lot of things, so it can be anything.
Definitely. I'm going to jump into some audience questions because they
Yeah,
are like very specific to what we kind of talked about, but
sure.
I'll loop back, keep asking questions. We're not anywhere near done yet. We still have quite a bit of time, but this was from Peg Y. She says, what has being diagnosed with ADD, ADHD meant for you? What's the best part about being diagnosed? Like, how does it help you?
Well, that whole little speech I just
Yeah.
gave used to include saying I was a terrible person because I didn't understand
Mm.
that it wasn't that I was a bad person, it's that I'm not neurotypical. And I think a lot of people, particularly women with ADHD, go through their lives thinking, well, I'm lazy, or I'm just a slob, or I'm just don't have motivation, or I'm just incapable of following through on something, all these things that you sort of beat yourself up with. And a diagnosis meant that I could sort of slowly accept that it's not that, I'm just bad and worthless. It's that, there is, my brain works differently and there are things that I can do about that. And it also meant medication, which was really revelatory for me. I I wrote this book called The Orphan's Tales, and it's a pretty complicated book. In some ways, I look at that book now and I'm like, how did anyone not suggest that I had ADHD? It's 1,000 pages of people constantly interrupting each other. Like that's the entire structure of the book. And I wrote, people asked all the time, like, how did you structure it? Did you keep notes? And I didn't, because the only way I was able to work was through hyperfocus. I wrote most of my books in a couple of months or less because I couldn't rely on my brain to keep working on it after that. And I was able to, once I was medicated, once I was using new sort of techniques to deal with, I don't even like calling it a disorder. I'm not one of those people who says, oh, it's a superpower. It's definitely not. But it's just a different way of being. It's not disordered necessarily. It's just other. But once I could understand what worked for me and what didn't, I was able to do much more sustained work over a long period of time, rather than just don't eat, don't think, don't sleep for 45 days and do nothing but light a keyboard on fire. And that's a completely legitimate way to do things, and to some extent I still do that, but it's not sustainable in the long term. And so I think the fact that I've been able to be a professionally producing and published writer for 18 years now is very much down to actually figuring out how my brain worked.
Bookend Jam asks, you mentioned about being frustrated at the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie. What's a piece of work that you would want to rewrite if you were given full creative control?
Oh my God. Oh, that's a hard one to just like throw at you and like just come up with something. All of the Terminator movies after Terminator 2. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Just give me the franchise, I'll fix it.
Someone needs to. So,
Yeah.
Alicia M asks, beyond the tropes of folklore, how do you see your background in classics influencing this novella? And if you want to elaborate, your works in general.
Oh, I mean, classics is it's so funny because nowadays people would say what a useless degree, and what it's just this side of underwater basket weaving. But the thing about underwater basket weaving is that that's just how you make baskets. You have to get the reeds wet. They won't work otherwise. And B, if you've ever been to a farmer's market, I think I could have made a lot more money making baskets than I could as a writer, man. They make bank. But like it seems like an impractical degree, but I owe so much to the work I did as a classicist, and much of the sort of, oh, she has this unique style that people talked about all the time when I was just starting out, was the fact that I had 3 languages bouncing around in my head.
Mm.
And like my syntax instincts were broken because those 3 languages work in radically different ways. And I think to some extent, that is still, though I've calmed down a lot as I've gotten older, that is still a big part of my writing, that I do speak languages other than English. I do speak languages that are vocabulary wise, at the root of English, we get 60% of our vocabulary from Latin. Latin gets a significant amount of vocabulary from Greek. But syntactically, we get virtually nothing from either of those languages. And despite the fact that people have studied them together forever, Latin and Greek are actually not related. They are really very, very, very different languages. And they are, Latin is extremely orderly, it is extremely mathematical, it is extremely regular and predictable, and Greek is a hot mess. And I think that like those 2 ways of dealing with language are the ways that I deal with language in my books. I go back and forth between these 2 sort of methods of messing with English. And of course, the sort of historical and folkloric grounding of classics informs everything that I write, from the Prester John series, which was literally inspired by a line of Aristotle, all the way up through The Past is Red, which still deals with Webster and Shakespeare and all of the work that they did that comes right from the classical world. And yeah, I mean, it's always in there somewhere forever.
Do you find it, I don't know, difficult to get the language you want on the page because all those languages are bouncing around? Or is it easier because they're bouncing around and you kind of understand how it's going to sound and read in English?
I don't find it difficult at all to get the language I want on the page, but I do
Uh,
find it somewhat difficult to get the language that other people want.
sure.
Um, so it's actually a constant process of kind of winnowing down and shortening and simplifying the sort of, well, the garbage town that's in my head.
Mm.
And then we all have a garbage town in our head. We're all just this mishmash of everything that we've ever come across in pop culture, been taught by our parents, or, experienced in our own lives and been told by people we think are smart, or people we think are stupid, or people we think are terrible, or people we think are brilliant. Everything that we've ever taken in just kind of floats around up there and gets sorted into villages. And that is, mine just has a lot of really old stuff in it. And unfortunately, I get I get ragged on a lot in my adult work for my long sentences, and I don't really do that so much in my middle grade work because children are going to read it. But you can just blame Cicero for that. Like, Cicero is notorious among students of the classics for having sentences that go on for literally pages at a time, and maybe the verb comes at the end and maybe it doesn't, because fuck you. So Cicero is at fault for all of my subclauses, I think.
Mhm. Peg also asks a question about, since you read a lot of horror, do you find it easy to write in that genre, or do you find it disturbing to write?
Oh, I mean, I find it very easy, and in some ways, I have to kind of keep myself from tipping over too much into horror, if that's not sort of the thesis of the book, because I I guess in Tetley style, I find it easy to write something very disturbing and pull something beautiful out of it, but that doesn't take the disturbing part away. So if I'm not supposed to be writing a very dark book, I kind of have to keep myself from tipping over into the darkness.
Mhm. Um, Another question from Bookend Jam. I'm gonna kind of modify this. I'll ask that question, but how did COVID and the pandemic most affect your writing in the past 18 months?
I mean, we had no childcare for one thing, so that was a huge just sort of bomb that went off. And our son was 17 months old when lockdown started. So like just when I felt like I was getting myself back and getting back on top of things and ready to start working again, like the world ended. So it was very emotionally difficult to go through, and we were very isolated on the island, more than most, because there's no sense of like you can get things delivered and you can you know have bubbles and things like that. It's just not a thing when you live on an island with less than 1,000 people on it. So we were just completely locked down for so long. And I did finish a novel, and I did write short stories and novellas, and I did work really hard. But I also found, what I found most difficult was that I suddenly had no input to make output out of.
Mm.
There was no experience to translate into work. There was no stimulation. There was no, all I could do was sort of read or watch television. There was no immediate life to sort of spark, new places for a story to go. So that was really difficult for me,
Mhm.
uh, to, to keep on working when everything seemed so grim, but mostly so quiet, and so dim, because you just couldn't go anywhere or do anything. Writing is a lonely profession. When I moved to an island, the deal was that I would be traveling to conventions and doing readings and all of that sort of thing, and then it would be a nice place to come back to. Not so much like never leave,
Mhm.
don't get on this boat.
Mhm.
So that was definitely a very strange time.
For sure. And then the question that I skipped over to get to the COVID part was, what other apocalyptic fiction or horror, or what has just been influencing you and getting you excited outside of your work, obviously?
Well, there's a very cool new horror book called Road of Bones by Christopher Golden coming out next year, early next year. And boy, I mean, I haven't read anything that genuinely made my heart race like that in a while.
Mm.
It really feels like one of those kind of classic horror thrillers. It was really great. I really enjoyed Hank Green's duology that finished up last year, the year before. Time has no meaning anymore. So I really very much enjoyed that. I I I gotta be honest, like with COVID, it's been really tough because like I felt unable to kind of deal with emotions. Uh, like I was already dealing with so much, and we had a lot of family members pass away, and like anything that was going to actually like make me feel my own feelings, I was like, nope, I really can't handle that. I already have to write my own feelings. So like I watched a lot of trash while I while I was under lockdown, just really terrible stuff. But people are creating great work all the time, and though horror as a genre is not as popular as it once was, it really just goes by other names now. It's kind of been absorbed and atomized into a lot of
Mhm.
different genres. So you can find that good horror stuff everywhere.
And then I usually don't ask this to writers, but I feel like this may be known or maybe not. What can this book just came out, but what can we expect next? What's out
Well,
there?
I have a
Yes.
horror book coming out next. I have a book called Comfort Me with Apples that's coming out in October. It is my mother referred to it as the little murder book, and it is. It's a little murder book. It is genuinely my first kind of murder thriller. I'm very very proud of it. If you have a mom who's into murder shows or you're into murder shows, that's my recommendation. There's such a huge twist in it that we always knew it was going to be difficult to market, because we can't tell anyone really what the book's about, except that it's kind of Gone Girl, Stepford Wives kind of thing, and just go into it blind is kind of the best way. So that's coming out in October. I have a new middle grade fantasy called Osmo Unknown and the Eight Penny Woods coming out in April. I have a best of collection, the best of Catherynne Valente short fiction collection coming out late next summer, I think. I actually have quite a bit, and a couple of things that haven't even been announced yet coming out in the next 18 months. So yeah, there's a lot.
Yes, that's why I wanted to ask, because I thought the Apple's the little murder book was announced. I just wanted to make sure because
Yeah.
I get so many emails. I don't know if it's actually announced or I just happen to know about it. I just want to thank you for doing this with Tattered Cover. If there's readers out there with any more questions, please ask them. And if it's quick, I'll get to it as we're kind of wrapping up. Is there, Catherine, a genre or something that you've never written that you might want to dip your toe into down the future? Is like anything that's like we wouldn't expect that you're interested in?
Oh, I mean, look, anything I haven't done yet is always interesting to me. I'm probably never going to do realism. I just don't really have any particular interest in realism. I think Come From Me with Apples is the closest to Divorce in the Suburbs I'm ever going to write. Uh, it doesn't hold a lot of oomph for me. I need something else there. But I really enjoyed writing the murder mystery, and I would do that again in a sort of bigger way. Um, yeah, I'd write anything. Like I said, my favorite thing to write is the thing that nobody expects. So we'll see sort of what comes down the pike. I have some pretty interesting out there things in my back pocket that I won't talk about yet. But
Yes.
yeah, I really enjoy. My first short story collection was called Ventriloquism, and I picked that title on purpose because I do enjoy throwing my voice, and anything that is really um, beyond what I've established. It's probably why I haven't written fairy tales in a long time, because I kind of got known as the fairy tale girl, and I was like, well, now I am not going to do it, as the penguin in the meme says. But I'm sure I'll go back to that at some point.
Definitely. And let's give readers, where can they find you on the internet for those of them who don't know? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente, on Patreon at Cat Valente, Instagram at Cat Valente, and then because someone's a jerk, it has to be CM Valente on Facebook, because there's already a Cat Valente on there. And I know. Why'd you have to ruin it, man? I could just say Cat Valente on everything. But yeah, on most things, Cat Valente, but on Facebook, CM Valente.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us while you're on vacation, visiting your father near the Blue Room. Um, Again, we're Tattered Cover. We are Colorado's largest independent bookstore. You can find us at tatteredcover.com, where you can buy Catherine's book that just came out and pre-order the one coming out in October, the Little Murder book, which is not what it's called. So I should stop saying that.
No,
Come
I
from
think that's
Me
going to
with
be our hashtag,
Yes,
though.
for sure. So Come From Me with Apples comes out down the road, so definitely pre-order it. If you do get one of the passes read, we do have signed book plates that will go into the book, so definitely please pre-order or buy them from us, and you'll get a signature from Kat. Thank you all so much, and everyone have a great evening. Catherine, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Bye.
Bye.